Welcome to Annapolis Mosaics. Our program spotlights people in our community who are involved in activities designed to promote good human relations. I am Michael Keller, the chair of the Annapolis Human Relations Commission and your host. My guests today are Catherine Hyde, who is the transgender coordinator for PFLAG of Howard County, and Owen Smith, who is a field organizer with Equality Maryland. Catherine and Owen, thank you for joining us on Annapolis Mosaics.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, let's start by talking a little bit about who transgender people are.
You want to try that one?
Sure, I think I got this. So transgender people is anyone who decides, feels in their hearts and mind that they are different than the gender they were assigned at birth. So for instance, I was assigned female at birth, but I identify as a different gender. So I decided to transition, took hormones, and now I live my life as a male.
What has inspired both of you to your activism on this general subject?
Well, I do this because I'm parent to a trans child, and we had a very difficult time understanding transgender in our child, and as a result, we did some things that were not the healthiest in raising our kid. So when I finally got educated and came to understand the whole concept of transgender, I felt that I wanted to make sure that no other family went through the difficulty and the strain and really the undue fear around the issue that my family went through.
The National Gay and Lesbian Task Force released a report last year which constituted the first nationwide analysis of discrimination against transgender people. And I'd like to talk about the various areas of discrimination that they identified and get your reaction, but also a little bit of a description of exactly what has been the experience of transgender people in these areas. One of the ones was in education. How are transgender people discriminated against in terms of education? And you don't have to necessarily pull statistics out of the report or anything like that. That's not what we're looking for here. What we're looking for are examples of the types of experiences that transgender people have day to day in these broad realm of American life, which is what was identified in the report by the task force. In virtually all areas of life, people face really harsh abuse and discrimination. So, one of them was at school, in the education realm. What can you tell us on that?
Well, I'm pretty sure you probably want to talk about your personal experience because you have a child. But I can tell you firsthand that I've gotten calls from all around the state from young people under 18 who have called my office and asked what they can do because their teachers are saying, like, they're making fun of them in class. They're calling them he, she, they're calling them it. They're sometimes, in some cases, not letting them use the bathroom. I've heard stories of violence. I actually recently heard a story of violence right out of the city of Annapolis, unfortunately, where students were picking on a transgender child, and the faculty became aware of the situation and didn't do anything to stop it. So it's everywhere from just picking on to blatant violence, and it comes from both peers and faculty.
Yeah, it's very difficult, I think especially for the children in elementary, middle, and high school, because Well, just because of the nature of our public schools. My kid was bullied from the very beginning for being, I have a child who is born with boy parts but is a very feminine person and identifies, I think, more as a girl than a guy. And my child was called pervert, freak, fag, homo, 100 things every day, constantly. And one of the stories I like to tell is that when we went to the Howard County Council to talk about adding gender identity and expression to the classes protected on the non-discrimination legislation, Courtney Watson said to me that she had that this issue was near and dear to her heart because her child, who's evidently very athletic and captained several athletic teams, went to school with a trans girl. And I asked what school, and she told me, and I said, that's my trans girl your child goes to school with. And she said that her son said to her, "Mom, I don't know, Will. I certainly don't understand, Will. But I do know that the way they treat her is wrong." And that's someone who had no skin in the game, saying that this is wrong, what we're doing to this student. So I think only one teacher ever intervened on my child's behalf.
The other thing that comes to my mind on this is I remember recently seeing the movie Bully. I don't know if you've ever seen that.
No, I haven't seen it yet, but I've heard it.
But there is one scene out of it, out of one state, Oklahoma, a small town in Oklahoma, where you had a similar incident in which a teacher, in calling the roll, made reference to one student as saying, "Well, I'm not sure if I'm supposed to call you a boy or a girl." A teacher did that. So what you're describing is something that really does occur. There are other areas. Employment and the workplace. What goes on there?
My kid doesn't have a job. You know, anytime we step out of what's expected, it makes people nervous. And I think trans people, because we can't sometimes, you know, and this gets me so angry because it's all based on physical presence. There are many trans people in the world who don't read as trans. You can't tell, and that's should be neither here nor there. But then if they haven't caught up with the gender marker on the identification, the moment you get their papers, then people get frightened and they find a reason not to hire them. So, you know, I help parents of trans kids, and they're worried about two things. They're worried about violence, and they're worried about employment, jobs. Is my kid ever going to get a job and get out of my house?
Another area is housing.
I could take this one. So what we have found, like both, I listen to stories of other transgender people all the time, but I'm transgender myself, so I can tell you firsthand what has happened to me.
All right, do tell us.
So after going through to college to become an EMT and graduating the top of my class, I went to job interview after job interview after job interview. Everybody's really excited to have me come in, called me back, really, really excited. I would go there, my identification is not switched. I would go to shake their hand. I literally watched people do this. Take their hand away from me when I went to meet them, when they found out that my legal name is different than how I present, or is more feminine than how I look. So as a result, I ended up losing my apartment. When I lost my apartment, I ended up, you know, going to friends' houses for a little while. When that no longer worked, I ended up sleeping in my car for 9 months because shelters did not know how to take me into the shelter, and it became unsafe. They were saying that they couldn't have me in the shelter because they were afraid that I would get hurt. But then I didn't have shelter, so then I slept in a car. So that is like one particular place. There was another period of time in my life also before I had the job that I have now where I didn't have a really great income, but I had enough of an income to afford an apartment, and time came where I needed to look for another apartment, and I found one in a great neighborhood in my price range. I went in to go meet the landlord to talk about like me renting the place. And the landlord asked me questions about my genitalia, raised the price of the apartment by $200, and said that she couldn't take a check from people like me. So I had to pay her directly with cash. And then I asked my friend, because I wanted to make sure that this was just not just somebody who was, you know, maybe having an off day. I asked my friend, who is female and presents female, but about the same stature. We had the same job. We worked at the same place. We had the same income level. And my friend went in, and magically the rent was $200 cheaper. Checks were fine. Sunshine and moonbeams to my friend.
We've had from my group of parents, one of our children was kicked off campus, and in looking for off-campus housing was told, we don't rent to people like you. When my child tried to go into Towson University last year, there was no gender-neutral housing available, so my kid had to commute. That's changed now. They have that they're starting a pilot program. So it's very difficult, and it's just based on fear and ignorance, not understanding. These are our children, our brothers, our sisters, our neighbors. These are people like us.
Okay. How about public accommodations, like restaurants and other places like that? Do you experience discrimination in that area too?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, any government agency. I'm hoping you all are different, but any government agency I have to go into when I have to show my identification, depending on I'm at the mercy of whoever's working. And if there is no set in stone policies on how we're going to treat people who are transgender, the likelihood of me being discriminated against is high. I've heard stories of people not getting things like food stamps because the person thought that they were lying about who they were. I've heard stories of people being asked to leave grocery stores and told they can only come grocery shopping between the hour of 1 a.m. and 3 a.m. And I know people who grocery shop at that time. I myself am one of those people, because it's just safer. I've heard stories of people getting kicked out of restaurants, bars, just for being who they are, just for coming in and being transgender, and somebody having a problem with it.
We're going to take a break now, but when we return, I'll be continuing the conversation with Owen and Catherine about the discrimination that transgender people have experienced.
Hi, I'm Annapolis Mayor Josh Cohen, and I want to tell you about a new free way for you to enjoy downtown Annapolis. Our unique shops, our dining, our entertainment, and our historic maritime charm.
Did you know that Annapolis has a new circulator trolley that will shuttle you free from one end of the central business district to the other? Well, after parking at Knighton or Park Place Garage for just $5 a day, you can get on the circulator by simply raising your hand anywhere along the route and see what downtown Annapolis has to offer. For more information, go to annapolis.gov and click on circulator.
We're talking today with Catherine Hyde, who is the transgender coordinator for PFLAG of Howard County, and Owen Smith, field organizer for Equality Maryland. And we're talking about the ways in which transgender people in Maryland have experienced discrimination. One of the problems that has often come up for transgender people is receiving updated identity documents. And for most people, this is very, very routine, but it's my understanding that it can be a real nightmare for transgender people. Could you let our viewers know your experiences?
That's yours. We haven't done it.
I haven't done it either, so I can only talk from
Okay.
other people's experiences. But yeah, I mean, there's a cost that is involved in changing your documents. And as we've already talked about, when you're transgender, it's really difficult to find employment, which means it's really difficult to have an income, which means it's really difficult to pay for your documents to get changed. But most likely, the fact that your documents aren't changed are the reason that you're not getting that job to begin with, unless they're doing a credit check, which they can also do, and then it'll show a difference. But, so yeah. So there's a cost involved, and it can be very time consuming. There are some really awesome projects in Maryland now that have come out, and whole groups of attorneys are coming out to help people with this, but the Free State Legal Project has a project where they're helping people get their identification documents changed, and they can also help if you're under the age of 18 get your documents changed. But yeah, I mean, it involves like posting publicly that you're changing your name, why you're changing your name. That can be really scary for a lot of people. So yeah, it's more common than not that transgender people do not have their documents changed.
Yeah. How about treatment by the police, by law enforcement?
Well, that's very frightening from a parent's perspective. You know, one of the stories I tell is that when my child was a senior, they brought in the local police department to talk to the kids about drinking and driving, and the policeman had a PowerPoint presentation and was, you know, thinking, I'm sure in his head he was talking to teenage boys and looking for a laugh, so he showed a PowerPoint and said, so just don't drink and drive, because if you do, this will happen to you, and showed a picture of a young man who'd been sick on himself, showed a picture of a young man who'd gone to the bathroom on himself, and then showed a picture of a young man dressed as a woman. So, of course, my child's in the audience. My child is being regularly bullied and harassed at school every day, and here's a person in a position of authority essentially saying it's okay to mock trans people. So, unfortunately, not all police, in fact, very few, I think, police departments are trained in understanding transgender people and how to deal with that difference between how someone presents and what their documents say. Mm-hmm. And they don't always react very well. Mm-hmm. And I'm not sure, but I think we're still at the place where if you're incarcerated, they will incarcerate you based on your genitalia and not, you know, so we're nowhere near where we need to be. And it's horrifying. As the parent of a teenager who, God bless my child, but she's a ding-dong, you know, is liable to do something stupid and end up in a very, very dangerous place. So,
mm-hmm. How about the health care field? That's one in which most people would say, well, there's not going to be any discrimination there, but I'm already seeing your reaction to that. Well, give us some elaboration.
So I can tell you from a personal perspective, and I can tell you from just, you know, having heard many, many stories. I've heard stories of people needing procedures because there was like a massive like infection where an organ would need to be removed. And because the person was transgender, they were not given the removal procedure that was necessary because people thought they were faking it to just have their gender reassignment surgery. And people, like, it's actually a really good friend of mine I'm talking about right now, but lived in excruciating pain for like a year. Like, I would watch them double over in pain and I couldn't do anything. So like that was really tough. But I have also heard like experiences of people, and I myself have experienced going to the emergency room, and I actually had a really serious medical emergency when I went to the emergency room, and I had to explain to my doctor before they would treat my injury what transgender was. And they would not allow my friend into the room who was my advocate, so I didn't have any like ally backup. My parents don't live near here. There was no way for me to get like the assistance I needed. So healthcare can be really problematic. It also, procedures are not covered by our insurance. So I pay out of pocket for my hormones every month. I would pay for my surgeries if I chose to have them, which are extremely expensive. They're not covered by insurance either. Even though that they're like the medical treatment plan for somebody who is transsexual.
Yeah, for parents of transgender children, we actually recommend they put together a safe folder that documents that their child has been seen by, a reputable psychologist and is under the treatment of a reputable doctor, because these kids, when they go into the emergency room, are incredibly vulnerable, and it becomes about their gender identity and not about the injury. So it's really, the medical profession has a long, long way to go in preparing our doctors to not only treat transgender people in the way they need to be treated as a medical procedure, but just in treating them with respect.
Mm-hmm. Now let's talk about what is undoubtedly the most painful forms of discrimination, which I'm aware that transgender people experience, and that's family rejection.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that? And I know it's tough, but can you talk about it?
You can try. Family rejection is really hard, and I think that, in my experience, it has amplified every other discrimination I've faced because of my family's inability to be 100% on board with me and give me the support that I needed. Because I came out as transgender, my family, needed time to process that, and I understand that. But when they needed time to process that, I got left alone, which then, when I needed help, when I was homeless, I didn't get the help that I needed from my family. So, I didn't get any assistance, I didn't get those things. And, luckily, my parents have come around, but I know people whose parents have not, and that's really sad. And I don't have a relationship with my little brother at all anymore. He got married, I have a niece, and I will probably never meet my niece or my brother's new wife because he decided that what I was doing to be who I am was something that was really hurtful for him and his religious beliefs.
It is, as you say, by far the hardest thing. Transgender people suffer daily discrimination just walking down the street, the second looks, the inappropriate questions. And to have that coupled with a family that doesn't understand or has kicked you out, the disproportionate number of trans children are just kicked out of their houses. It's just ignorance, it's just lack of understanding. And those who aren't kicked out are often shamed. And unfortunately, trans people attempt suicide at 25%, or 25 times the rate of the general population. So that's how difficult it is not only to be trans, but to be trans in a society that's ignorant and anxious about it and not supportive in any way. One of the things we try so hard to do at PFLAG, which is Parents, Family, and Friends of Lesbians and Gays, is help families to understand and embrace their children and celebrate. These are God's gifts to us. These are magnificent, special snowflakes that, that God has given us or the universe has made, and we need to celebrate them and hold them close in our hearts. So we try very hard to work with families to help them move through that acceptance process more quickly so that our kids don't have to go through what Owen had to go through.
One of the findings in the report that I referenced to earlier from the task force was that transgender people of color experience discrimination at much higher levels than do whites. Can you comment on that?
All I can say is I know that is true. From all of my friends who have everything, socioeconomic background, the way that they have decided to transition, age, and the only difference is that their skin is darker than mine. The things that they have endured is way, you can times what I have gone through by 2, easily. And it just in my experience, it is just that much worse. Like the family rejection was that much worse. Their family's not back. The bullying that they faced. I know somebody who was taped inside of their gym locker, like literally duct taped inside of their gym locker. I know, and like, you know, race is a compounding factor. So all of those things, like the poverty level, I know many people who live under $5,000 a year. Like many, like trans people of color. So yeah, it's definitely worse.
Are there laws at the federal level and then at the state and local level in Maryland that address the issue of discrimination against and abuse of transgender people? What's the status of the laws that exists nationally, in Maryland, statewide, and in the localities within Maryland? What's the picture? I mean, you have presented, I think, a very graphic demonstration, illustration of the level of not only discrimination, but just downright of abuse that occurs for transgender people in our society. What legal protections, if any, exist at the current time?
So I'll start out with positives.
Okay.
So, and locally in Maryland,
All right.
we've got really good comprehensive discrimination protections in Baltimore City, Baltimore County, Howard County, and Montgomery County. So we've got a little patchwork of safe haven. Statewide, we do not yet have anti-discrimination protections. However, we do have in our hate crimes statute, statewide, it does include gender identity or expression, which is what we're talking about when we're talking about people who are transgender. So that's a positive. But all of those patchwork protections that we have, like on the local level, would be infinitely amplified and could actually be enforced if we had statewide protections. So we really need to get on that. And then federally, the EEOC actually just came out with a ruling that said that henceforth people who were transgender could write a letter talking about discrimination they faced in the workplace based on their gender identity or expression under sex as a protected class. But what people, and that is so awesome and has helped so many people, but what people don't understand is that is a really lengthy, costly legal process. Just because you get a letter doesn't mean you can afford to pay an attorney or can pay an attorney that long, or even that your case will be taken by someone. And it also, you know, it can change based on the administration. So if we get another, you know, administration in that says, no, we don't like that game, well, then they can change their minds. So we could lose that protection.
Yeah. You know, one of the things I feel so strongly about legislation is that legislation is what causes people to get educated. When they're held legally accountable to behave, then they go out of their way to get the understanding they need that allows them to comfortably behave the way we want people to behave in society. I remember when the discrimination against women legislation went through, the way men spoke to me in the workforce shifted dramatically. So that's why I think legislation is so important. That's what's going to get people over that hurdle of, I don't understand, into, oh, okay, these are just other people.
And also, the state legislature has taken up the issue of discrimination against transgender people, but the bill just hasn't passed. Is that correct?
Yes, correct.
Okay. But
Yet.
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 You're still pursuing it and,
Yes.
and plan to do so in the next session of the General Assembly.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you for viewing our program today, and please join us again on Annapolis Mosaics. If you would like more information about the Annapolis Human Relations Commission, jot down the information on your screen. You can reach us at 410-263-7998 or by email at hrcommission@annapolis.gov. or check out our page at the City of Annapolis website. Go to www.annapolis.gov, click on the icon that says Boards and Commissions, and then scroll down to the Human Relations Commission link. And always remember the words of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who said, "We have flown the air like birds and swum the seas like fishes, but have yet to learn the simple act of walking the earth as brothers and sisters." Thank you.